The pounding started before sunrise. Sharp, steady, official. Not angry. Not rushed. Just persistent, like someone who knew I had no choice but to open the door. I pulled on my boots and looked through the window. 2 white utility trucks were parked across my dirt road, angled just enough to block it. Hazard lights blinking, engines running. A woman stood at the gate holding a folder, posture straight, expression calm. Victoria Hargrove. When I opened the door, she didn't step forward. She waited until I came to her, like this was a scheduled appointment. "Morning," she said, polite, almost gentle. She handed me a printed notice. "We completed a jurisdiction review last quarter. Your parcel now falls inside the agricultural maintenance overlay. It's a standard adjustment, Section 4, Paragraph B, mostly administrative." I scanned the page. Terms. Codes. Codes. Deadlines. "I'm outside your boundary," I said. She nodded slightly, sympathetic. "You were?" The revised map closed a gap. Nothing personal. "We just need compliance. Livestock relocation, surface restoration, and a temporary vacate while we assess environmental impact. 72 hours should be sufficient." Behind her, 2 workers stepped off the truck and began placing red stakes along my fence line, measured. "Careful, routine." "You can't mark my land," I said. "They're reference points," she replied. "Helps everyone stay organized." A stake went into the soil with a dull, final thud. Another followed. I heard tires on gravel and turned to see a sheriff's truck easing toward the gate, slow and non-committal. I looked back at the notice in my hand, then at the red line forming across my field. This wasn't about rules. It was about control. If you want to hear more true stories like this, make sure you hit that subscribe button to HOA Update. And tell me in the comments, where are you watching from? I didn't buy the farm to start a fight. I bought it because it was quiet. Real quiet. The kind where you can hear the wind move through dry grass and know exactly how alone you are. The place had been empty for years. Broken fence, leaning barn, weeds taller than the gate. Most people saw work. I saw space. Space to breathe, to rebuild something simple, something mine. The county records were clear when I signed. Unincorporated land, outside subdivision limits, no HOA jurisdiction. I checked twice, then a third time. I wanted certainty. The first months were hard but clean. I patched the barn roof 1 board at a time, hauled stones out of the field, repaired the water line. Mornings started with cold air and the slow rhythm of chores. Feed buckets, boots in mud, the low sound of my cows shifting in the stall. At night, the farm settled into silence so deep it felt like the world had paused. The subdivision on the ridge stayed distant. Neat houses, trimmed lawns. Rules. I saw their patrol cars sometimes near the paved road, but never near my gate. Different world, different rules. Then I met Victoria Hargrove. She arrived in a clean white car that looked wrong against dust and gravel. She stepped out with a clipboard and a practiced smile. Polite, careful, controlled. "I'm just introducing myself," she said. "We like to stay aware of nearby properties, especially agricultural ones. Sometimes small compliance issues can affect surrounding values." "I'm not in the association," I replied. "Of course," she said, nodding easily. "This is just informational." She looked past me at the barn, the fence, the animals. Not judgmental, not hostile. Just assessing, like someone reviewing a report. Before she left, she added, "If anything changes, we'll notify you through proper channels." Proper channels. After that, small things began. One afternoon, I found survey flags near my fence. Bright orange, pushed deep into the soil. I assumed county workers made a mistake and pulled them out. A week later, new ones appeared closer this time. I left them. Watched them. Then came the drone. A faint hum above the pasture one evening. I stepped outside and saw it hovering, steady, deliberate, not drifting like a hobby toy. It moved slowly along the fence line, paused above the barn, then angled toward the subdivision and disappeared. The quiet didn't feel empty anymore. It felt observed. Caleb Morris, the only neighbor down the road, noticed before I spoke. He leaned on my fence one afternoon, watching the goats push each other around. "You get a visit from her yet?" he asked. "Who?" He didn't answer right away, just looked toward the ridge. "Victoria." I nodded once. He exhaled slowly. "They expand with paperwork, not bulldozers. Environmental overlays, compliance zones. People think they're safe until the letters start. My deed is clean," I said. "County land." "That's what everyone says." I didn't argue. I didn't believe him either. I trusted records. Maps don't lie. Boundaries don't move without process. So I checked again, pulled the deed, compared survey maps, verified county zoning files. Everything matched what I signed. Everything said the same thing: outside jurisdiction. For a few days, that certainty steadied me again. Then I came home from town and saw an envelope taped to my door. Thick, official, neutral, no greeting, no explanation, just a header in bold: agricultural compliance review pending. I stood on the porch reading it twice. Then again, the words didn't change, but something inside me did. Because the letters had started, and Caleb had been right. They didn't call ahead. They didn't ask permission. They arrived like a scheduled inspection no one had bothered to tell me about. 3 vehicles rolled through my open gate just after 9. County style, clean, unmarked, except for small association decals on the doors. No sirens. No urgency, just routine. The kind of routine that assumes compliance. I stepped out of the barn, wiping my hands on a rag. "Can I help you?" A man in a pressed shirt glanced at a clipboard. "Agricultural compliance review. We'll be conducting a site inspection." "This is private property," I said. He gave a small, patient smile. "Yes, that's why we're here." They spread out without waiting, one toward the water line, another to the barn, 2 more pacing along the fence with measuring wheels clicking softly over dirt. Tablets came out. Photos. Notes. Quiet, methodical. "What exactly are you looking for?" I asked. "Standard items," he said. Water usage confirmation. Livestock density. Surface runoff impact. Another inspector approached and handed me a printed sheet. "Preliminary notice," she said. I looked down. Unauthorized irrigation draw, then another page. Livestock zoning inconsistency .6, then another. Environmental compliance concern. Each one listed fees. Not small ones. "This is wrong," I said. "I'm outside your boundary." "Boundary was updated," the man replied, still calm. "Administrative correction." I went inside and brought back my deed and survey map, edges worn from being checked too many times. I held them out. "Here." County records. Original boundary. He glanced, then handed them back without reading. "You can submit those during formal review." Before I could respond, Victoria's voice came from behind them. She walked across the pasture in low heels that somehow stayed clean. Clipboard in hand, expression neutral, almost sympathetic. "I know this feels sudden," she said, "but the revised zoning closed a mapping gap between the ridge and the lower parcels. It's standard. We see this often." "You moved the line," I said. "We clarified it," she replied gently. "The association is responsible for maintaining environmental continuity. Agricultural activity affects runoff, odor, and adjacent property values. This ensures consistency." Behind her, 2 workers drove metal stakes into the ground, stretching measuring tape between them. "What are they doing?" I asked. "Marking the shared agricultural corridor," she said. "Reference only." Caleb appeared at my fence, arms folded, watching silently. After a moment, he spoke quiet but clear. "They did that at the Peterson place," he said. "Measured first. Then came the notices. Then the pressure. Victoria didn't react. I looked from the stakes to the inspectors to the fines in my hand. This wasn't confusion. This was procedure. Procedure with an outcome already decided. An inspector approached again, holding a thicker document this time. "Formal warning," he said, handing it over. I didn't want to read it, but I did. Failure to comply with agricultural maintenance overlay requirements may result in enforcement action, including property seizure. The word sat heavier than the paper in my hand. Seizure. Not mistake, not misunderstanding. A process. And I had just been entered into it. I didn't call anyone that morning. No lawyer. No office, no rescue. I walked the boundary instead. The eviction notice stayed folded in my pocket while I followed the fence line slowly, boots pressing into damp soil, eyes on the ground instead of the horizon. If they had adjusted the map, there had to be a place where the adjustment touched reality. Lines on paper don't move without something physical following them. At the north corner, where the old cedar post leaned slightly, I saw it, half buried under mud and grass. A survey cap. Brass. Scratched, but still stamped with the original county marker number. I knelt and cleared the dirt with my hands. It wasn't where the new map said it should be. Not even close. I walked 20 more yards and found another, older, deeper, nearly swallowed by soil. Same stamp, same original line. I checked the printed overlay I had folded in my back pocket, the one showing the revised boundary. The new line didn't follow the markers. It crossed them, not correction. Not clarification, movement. I spent the rest of the day tracing the old boundary, finding buried markers, photographing each one, measuring distance with the tape I used for fence repairs. Mud soaked my knees. My hands went numb from digging. At one point, I slipped and dropped my phone in the dirt, and for a second I just sat there, breathing hard, staring at the line of old posts stretching across the field like quiet witnesses. That night, I spread everything across the kitchen table, photos, coordinates, printed maps. I overlaid them again and again, checking angles, distances, stamps. The pattern was clear. The county markers hadn't moved. The map had, but a shifted line alone wouldn't stop them. I needed proof of intent, something showing this wasn't clerical drift but deliberate expansion. So the next morning, I drove into town and requested archive zoning revisions. Not recent ones. The older ones, the incremental filings nobody looks at twice. It took hours, stacks of paper, and a clerk who kept asking why I needed documents from years back. Because small changes hide in time. Back home, I laid the filings out in sequence. Month by month, year by year. Each revision tiny. Each adjustment justified by environmental continuity or watershed consistency. Alone, harmless. Together, directional, toward me. By evening, the evidence sat in front of me, not dramatic, not loud, but undeniable. A pattern of movement masked as maintenance. I hired Rachel after that, not to find the truth. To present it, she reviewed my photos, the marker coordinates, the archived filings, and gave a small nod. "You did the hard part," she said. "This shows the boundary was moved on paper, not on land. That matters." We filed a formal challenge with the county quiet, procedural, documented, no speeches, no accusations, just facts attached to record. And something inside me shifted, not confidence, not victory, direction. Because this was no longer confusion, no longer pressure without shape. It was a system, and systems can be traced. That night I walked the pasture again. The cows stood calmly at the trough. The wind moved through the grass in slow waves. My boots followed the old survey line. The real one still pressed into the land no matter what the paper claimed. They thought the map defined the ground. They thought the process would bury me. They thought isolation would make me comply. I stood there in the fading light, eviction notice still in my pocket, mud still on my hands, and understood something clearly. They hadn't expected me to look down. They thought I was alone, I said quietly to the empty field. They were wrong. I didn't move fast. I moved carefully. If the line had been shifted on paper, then everything after that, inspections, notices, restrictions, was built on that single adjustment. Rachel said the same thing when we sat at the table going over the marker photos again. We don't need drama, she told me. We need sequence. Show how the map changed, then show what they did with that change. So I started documenting everything. Not just the big moments, the small ones, the daily ones. The ones that looked harmless alone but formed a pattern when placed together. I mounted 2 cameras on the barn, angled toward the gate and the irrigation meter. Nothing hidden, nothing illegal, just recording what happened on my own property. Within 3 days, the footage showed more than I expected. Inspection teams entering without prior notice, utility workers adjusting the meter after hours, and one evening, an association vehicle stopping just outside the fence while someone photographed the pasture through the wire. Not dramatic, but consistent. Each clip went into a folder. Date. Time. Description. Then came the paperwork. Rachel filed a formal boundary dispute with the county survey office, attaching my marker photos and the archived zoning revisions I had traced. At the same time, we submitted a request for a procedural review. Why the agricultural maintenance overlay had been applied without direct parcel notification. The goal wasn't confrontation. It was record. Once something enters record, it can't be quietly erased. While that moved through channels, I kept walking the farm, not because I expected sabotage, but because I wanted certainty. The old markers remained where they always had been, buried, steady, indifferent to paperwork. Caleb came by one evening leaning against the fence like he used to. "You're pushing back," he said. "Documenting," I answered. He nodded slowly, then handed me a worn envelope. "Old notices," he said. "From when they tried shifting my boundary 5 years ago. I paid the fine and let it go." Shouldn't have. Inside were copies. Small compliance warnings, environmental reviews, language identical to what I had received. Not proof of wrongdoing, but proof of pattern. Rachel added them to the file. Then something unexpected happened. The pressure didn't increase, it paused. No new fines, no new inspections, no new visits, just silence from the association, procedural, measured silence, like they were recalculating. Silence isn't absence, it's preparation. 3 days later, the letter arrived. The final and enforcement hearing. Association review, session date. 1. Location. Rachel read it once, then closed the folder. "They want closure," she said. Public record. They believe the process still favors them. I stood at the kitchen sink, staring out toward the pasture. The cow had settled near the fence, chewing slowly, unbothered. The wind moved through the grass in steady waves, the same way it always had before any of this began. The farm hadn't changed, but the situation had. The markers were documented, the filings were recorded. The sequence was clear. I wiped my hands, folded the hearing notice, and placed it beside the eviction order on the table. Not as a threat anymore, as a step. Everything that could be prepared was prepared. Everything that could be recorded was recorded. There was no more documenting left to do. The process had reached its point. And now, it would have to play out. The morning of the hearing felt quieter than it should have. No wind, no distant engines, just the low creak of the barn door and the sound of grain hitting the feed bucket. I moved through the routine slowly, deliberately. Water check, gate latch, one last walk along the fence line where the old survey caps still sat buried beneath the soil. They hadn't moved. They never had. Rachel arrived without knocking, case folder under her arm, no speech. Just a nod. "Ready?" I locked the farmhouse and followed her truck toward the subdivision hall. the road changing from dirt to smooth pavement as we climbed toward Maple Crest. The place looked the same as always. Trim lawns, clean sidewalks, order. Nothing about it suggested conflict. That was the point. Inside, rows of chairs were already filled. Residents sat quietly, some watching, some avoiding eye contact, fear and curiosity in equal measure. This wasn't just about me anymore. It was about the process everyone lived under. Victoria stood at the front table, posture perfect, expression composed. Not hostile, not tense. Just assured, like this was a routine conclusion. The hearing opened with formal language compliance review, procedural enforcement, jurisdictional authority, calm voices, neutral words. Nothing emotional, everything administrative. Then Victoria spoke. Following repeated notices and failure to meet agricultural maintenance requirements, she said evenly, "The association recommends foreclosure authorization and land management transfer to restore environmental compliance and neighborhood standards. No drama. No threat, just procedure." Her attorney followed, measured, confident, organized. He presented the revised zoning map, the overlay classification, the compliance notices. When Rachel submitted our boundary marker photos, he reviewed them briefly and shook his head. "These markers predate the updated zoning framework," he said. "They do not invalidate the current overlay designation." Murmurs moved through the room. For a moment, the ground shifted under me. Not physically, procedurally. Because he wasn't denying the markers existed, he was reframing them, making them irrelevant within the system they controlled. Victoria didn't smile. She didn't need to. The process was leaning back in her favor. Rachel remained still, waiting. The attorney continued, calm and methodical. "All actions taken by the association followed standard compliance procedures. There is no evidence of improper boundary manipulation." The room began to settle. A few nods, a few relieved faces. The narrative rebuilding itself, order restored, issue resolved, process functioning. I felt it then. The edge. The point where resistance turns into confirmation of guilt. Where silence becomes acceptance. Rachel closed the folder slowly and looked at me. Not questioning, not urging, just acknowledging. It was time. I stood. Chairs shifted. Conversation stopped. Victoria turned toward me, expression unchanged, but attentive now. My hands were steady, not because I wasn't afraid, because the fear had already been accounted for. I walked forward, placed the final document on the table, and prepared to speak. Not to argue, to show. And everything they believed secure was about to be tested. I didn't start with a speech. I slid a single page across the table. Before the overlay, I said, there was a process. Notice, survey verification, parcel acknowledgement. Victoria's attorney glanced at it. "Standard language," he replied. "Look at the dates." He did. His brow tightened slightly. Rachel connected the projector and displayed a sequence, not just one map, but a timeline, year by year. Revision by revision, each adjustment small. Each labeled routine, together directional. Toward my parcel. The attorney straightened. "Incremental zoning updates are normal." "Yes," I said, "unless the physical survey never changed." Rachel switched the screen. Photos of the original county survey caps, time-stamped, geotagged, aligned with archived coordinates. The markers had not moved. Not in 5 years, not in 10. The room shifted. The attorney stepped forward quickly. "Survey caps alone don't invalidate jurisdiction." "No," I said, "but they show the land didn't change. Only the map did." Rachel displayed the next item, utility authorization logs, dates matching the moment my water flow was reduced. Approval signed under the agricultural overlay before the county finalized its review. Then inspection records initiated without parcel acknowledgement. Sequence. Pattern. Victoria's calm began to thin. These are administrative interpretations, she said. The association acted in good faith to maintain environmental continuity. I placed the last piece on the table. Drone footage. Not dramatic, just clear. A survey team photographing my pasture weeks before the overlay was filed. Stakes placed, measurements recorded. The decision had come first. The paperwork followed. Silence filled the hall, not confusion, recognition. The attorney spoke again, but slower now. This suggests procedural irregularity, not necessarily misconduct. At that moment, the county survey officer stood from the back row. "We've reviewed the submitted materials," he said evenly. "There is sufficient evidence to suspend the agricultural maintenance overlay pending formal investigation." A quiet ripple moved through the room. Another official followed. "All enforcement actions tied to that overlay, including eviction proceedings, are hereby paused." Victoria looked at the documents, then at the officials, then briefly at me. Not anger, not fear. Calculation ending, because the system she trusted had shifted away from her. Rachel closed the folder. No applause. No shouting. Just the slow sound of chairs moving, voices rising, order dissolving into realization. The process had spoken, and without the overlay, there was no claim. No seizure, no removal. Outside, the evening air felt lighter than it had in weeks. I stood near the steps, looking toward the distant line where my field began beyond the ridge. The farm hadn't moved, the markers hadn't moved. And now, the map would have to move back. The pressure was gone. The process had stopped, and my farm, quiet, steady, unchanged, was safe. The days after the hearing were quieter than I expected. Not empty, just steady, like something heavy had finally been set down. The county moved slowly, but it moved. The agricultural maintenance overlay was formally suspended, then placed under full review. Without it, the eviction order dissolved into paperwork with no authority behind it. Victoria didn't return to the hall. Notices from the association stopped. Within weeks, an interim board was appointed under county supervision while the investigation continued. No drama, no spectacle. Just signatures, letters, and the quiet shift of responsibility. The system correcting itself. Neighbors began coming by again, one at a time, not in groups. A nod at the gate. A short conversation by the fence. Some admitted they had trusted the process too easily. Others said nothing, just stood there longer than before, like the air felt different now. Caleb brought over a small wooden post he'd found near his field. Another old survey cap, worn but intact. "Guess the ground remembers," he said. The farm settled back into rhythm. The water ran steady. Feed trucks arrived without hesitation. The dust notices stopped. One evening, as the light faded, I watched the cow lower herself into the straw for the first time in weeks without pacing first. The wind moved through the grass in slow waves, the same way it always had, unconcerned with maps, filings, or hearings. I walked a boundary again a few days later, boots following the old line where the original markers rested beneath the soil. Nothing dramatic marked the end of it. No celebration. No announcement. Just a quiet confirmation that the land hadn't changed, and neither had I. I thought about how close it came, how easily procedure can become pressure, how silence allows small changes to grow until they feel permanent, and how, sometimes, the simplest act, looking closely, documenting carefully, refusing to step aside, can shift everything back. The farm was still here, still steady, still mine. And when the night settled over the fields, the quiet no longer felt uncertain. It felt earned. If you want to hear more true stories like this, make sure you hit that subscribe button to HOA Update. And tell me in the comments, where are you watching from?